Hi everyone! Today we're going to be going over some of the Makerspace's favorite Adobe Illustrator techniques. Adobe Illustrator is a very powerful tool, but not always the easiest to figure out where the buttons are. So we'll go over some of the ways that we've made all of the designs that you see around the Makerspace, and skills that help you laser cut even cooler shapes. First, you want to double check that you're in automation mode. Often, when you first open up Adobe Illustrator, it'll put you in Essentials, but when you're in Essentials, you're missing a lot of the important buttons that we'll be using. So if you switch your view to Automation in the top right corner, then you have access to a wider variety of tools. The first tool we'll be looking at is called Align. Align is a way we can arrange shapes in our design so that they are all on the same line, oriented with their tops even, what have you. The buttons for this tool are located on the top control panel. You can use Align Center, Align Left, Align Right, Align Middle to change the arrangement of your objects. Using the little box to the left of the Align buttons, choose the way in which you are aligning. So you can say Align to key object means that whatever object is highlighted, in this case pink square, all of the objects will be aligning or moving to be level with the pink square. If we're to change that, however, to the green square, then it aligns everything to the green square, same with the yellow square or the turquoise square. This tool is really helpful when you're trying to get everything centered. So for example, with these rectangles, you can align it vertically and horizontally, and all of the squares will be lined up together. It's also really visible when you're using a bunch of shapes of different sizes. You can see the way in which they move as we click the different buttons. Similarly to Align is Distribute. Rather than centering all the objects this time, Distribute spreads them out evenly across the distance between the objects that are the farthest away from each other. So in the case of these squares, if we were to move the pink square in and distribute again, you would redistribute them with a smaller spacing. This can be really helpful if you're copying and pasting a lot of the same object, trying to make a stack, say a wall of bricks, or in the case of Makerspace, showing 3D printing layers. However, it's important to note that although this distributes objects, it does not reorder them. Whatever object is in the back of your design digitally still will be. In our stack here, it got a little disorganized because the squares were out of order. Now we'll hop on over to the Pathfinder tool. The Pathfinder tool might be my favorite or most frequently used Illustrator tool ever. It's not typically visible off the bat, so if you click on the top bar, Windows, go to Pathfinder, it'll open the little Pathfinder window, and I recommend that you pin it to your right-hand control panel. Basically what Pathfinder does is it lets us manipulate two or more objects and use the different shapes in collaboration with one another. So I'll arrange a series of shapes here that we can test it out on, and we'll start with the shape modes. Alright, so select both objects, and then Unite creates one big shape out of the silhouette of the two original shapes. Minus Front uses the front shape to cut away from the back shape. Intersect only keeps wherever the two shapes overlapped, and Exclude only keeps wherever the two shapes did not overlap. Now let's do the same thing for Pathfinder using the line version rather than shape modes. These I find are a little more difficult to understand or see what's going on, but I'll walk through it best I can. As before, select both the shapes, then divide. Now this has split the two shapes into 3 discrete shapes using wherever the lines overlapped. So if we ungroup them, then we can move them individually. They've now been split along each line. Next we have trim. This trims away where the lines intersected, kind of cleans up the shapes. Merge works fairly similarly. Crop uses the front object to crop the rear object. In this case, the circle did not fully overlap with the square, so there's some negative space left behind. I'll give that an outline. The outline button turns the shapes into outlines, and each of those lines now can be manipulated separately. The outlines also retain the color of their original shape. Lastly is minus back, which subtracts the rear object from the front object. So it subtracted the square from the circle. Next, we'll move on to image trace. If Pathfinder is my favorite tool, then image trace is the second best. So what image trace does is it takes a raster graphic, for example, this photograph of a leaf, and turns it into a vector graphic. So rather than being a bunch of pixels, it becomes a bunch of shapes. So this can be found under Object, Image Trace, or whenever you click on a photograph, it should have the image trace option at the top bar. The images that work best for this are simple objects with lots of contrast. Clip art and icons are great for this, and they're useful because then you can use them for your laser cut files, as edited files for signage. There are a wide variety of different image trace options, and they often need some tweaking in order to get the best result. But in the case of this leaf, we'll just play around with it. So under the image trace panel, it pulls up all of the options that you can use to adjust the image trace that it performs. As you can see, the default is a little rough, so we can adjust the threshold so it catches more of the leaf as black. Could ignore white, so it excludes the white areas. And we could change the number of paths, corners, and amount of noise involved, but that takes some playing around with it to see what you can get the best result. If we select a different preset, however, we can get a dramatically different result. For example, choosing 6 colors, we get a leaf that still looks fairly like the photo, but it's now a vector graphic. And if we were to close the image trace panel, we could see how complex the shape really is now. So if we were to close this and expand it, you can click on the leaf, you can see all of the individual paths in there that now make up this leaf. The more accurate we make this by adding more colors, the more complex the shape tends to get. And now onto effects, which are located under the Effect tab. We'll start with Scribble. Effect, Stylize Scribble lets you fill an area with squiggly lines rather than solid color. And you can change how curvy it is, how spaced out the lines are, how much you're coloring inside the lines versus outside the lines. And it gives a really fun, childlike, artistic sort of feel. Drop shadows and glows are similar, so under Effect, Stylize, you can click Drop Shadow, which just adds kind of a standard dark shadow behind an object slightly to the side. Outer glow and inner glow, which just are similar to the drop shadow. You can change the color to whatever you'd like, and these colors diffuse from the outside or inside of the shape. And then there's feather, which softens the outside of the object. There's also round corners, but that one's a little silly because if you were to draw a shape yourself, you could just click on one of the white circles inside the corners and drag and change the rounded corners manually. Similarly, under Effects, you can go to Blur and select Gaussian or Radial. Gaussian blur applies the blur fairly evenly across the shape, focusing on the edges. The amount of blur can be adjusted. Radial blur, however, leads to very different results than Gaussian. It's good to know your text options. If we were to click the Type tool on the left control panel and just type like normal, the text would just run right off the page. It never will text wrap. You have to manually hit enter to create a new line. However, if you hover over the edge of a filled shape, you'll see it transform from a square to a circle and say path. If you click in, now when you type inside that shape, the text will wrap inside it. However, sometimes you want to type around the edge of a shape, like in the Cal Maritime Makerspace icon you see in the bottom left. So if you click and hold on the Type tool, you'll see Type on a path. And now when you hover over the outline of a shape and it says path, you can type and it will follow the edge of your object. You can drag and drop where the text starts and ends. You can also change if the text is inside the shape or outside, and adjust the text like normal, changing the font size and style. I hope these tools help you take your Illustrator designs to the next level and inspire your curiosity to keep poking around in that cool program. Thanks for watching. Bye!